I lived in a pre-war apartment building in the city for about 3 years. The kind of place with high ceilings, radiator heat, and those old metal mailboxes in the lobby. Each tenant got a storage cage in the basement, just chain link squares with padlocks, maybe 6 by 8 feet each. I barely used mine. Some holiday decorations, a couple boxes of books I kept meaning to donate. It was late November when I went down to grab my winter coat. I'd left it in a box from the previous season and kept forgetting about it until the temperature finally dropped. It was around 9 at night after work. I took the elevator down to the basement level. The basement was one long corridor with cages on both sides, fluorescent lights overhead. Half of them were burned out, so you'd walk through these patches of shadow between pools of flickering white light. The super was supposed to replace them, but he never got around to it. My cage was near the far end. I unlocked it, stepped inside, and started rummaging through boxes. That's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow, measured footsteps coming from somewhere deeper in the basement. I froze. The building had a boiler room and maintenance area past the storage cages, but I'd never seen anyone down there at night. The footsteps stopped. I kept digging through the box, trying to ignore it, telling myself it was just the building settling or pipes or something. Old buildings make noise. But then I heard them again, closer this time, and they stopped right as I stopped moving. I stood up slowly and looked down the corridor. Nothing. Just the cages, the flickering lights, the concrete floor. But I had this overwhelming feeling that I wasn't alone. Like when you know someone's watching you before you actually see them. I found my coat and backed out of the cage. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen when I came in. 3 cages down from mine, the padlock was open, just hanging there on the latch. The cage door was slightly ajar. I'd passed that cage on my way in. I was certain it had been closed. I should have left, but I don't know, curiosity, stupidity, maybe just disbelief. I walked over and pulled the door open wider. It was darker in that section, one of the burned-out light zones. I used my phone flashlight. The cage was almost empty, just an old wooden chair in the center facing the back wall, and on the chair was a coat. A heavy winter coat, dark wool, draped over the back like someone had just taken it off. The thing is, the coat was still warm. I touched it before I could think better of it, and I could feel the heat, like someone had been wearing it seconds before. I backed away and just stood there in the corridor listening. No footsteps, no sounds at all except the hum of the building's heating system, but the air felt different, heavier, like the pressure had changed. I walked back to the elevator as calmly as I could manage, even though everything in me wanted to run. I kept my eyes forward. Didn't look back at the cages. When the elevator doors finally closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The next day, I mentioned it to the super. He looked at me like I was crazy. Said the maintenance crew had been there in the afternoon, but nobody works at night. He checked the logs. No one else had gone down there. I asked him about the cage with the open lock. He went down to look. When he came back up, he said all the cages were locked tight, nothing out of place. I moved out 4 months later. Never went back to that storage cage. My winter coat's probably still down there for all I know. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that chair, that warm coat, and I wonder who was wearing it and where they went when I got too close.
If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 200 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter.
I used to work at a law firm downtown. Mid-sized place, maybe 40 attorneys, support staff, the usual. The building was old, built in the 20s, converted from something else. A bank, I think. We occupied floors 3 through 7. The basement was storage. File boxes, old records, the kind of stuff that firms keep for decades because they have to. I was a paralegal, and sometimes I'd get sent down to pull files from archive. It wasn't a frequent thing, maybe once every few weeks. You'd take the service elevator down, walk through this narrow hallway with exposed pipes along the ceiling, and then you'd get to the archive room. Rows and rows of metal shelving, cardboard boxes labeled by year and case number. One overhead light every 20 feet or so. It smelled like dust and old paper and something else, something slightly chemical I could never quite place. This was in winter, late January. I had to pull a file from 2003. I went down around lunch when the office was quiet. The elevator rattled the whole way down. It was one of those old freight elevators with the metal gate you had to pull shut. When it stopped, I slid the gate open and stepped out into the hallway. The lights were motion activated, but they were slow. You'd walk into darkness for a few seconds before they'd flicker on behind you. I hated that. I made it to the archive room and found the section I needed. 2003 was near the back, past rows of older files. I was scanning box labels when I heard something fall. A soft thud like a book hitting carpet. It came from somewhere to my left, a few aisles over. I stopped and listened. Nothing. I kept looking, found the box, pulled it off the shelf. Then I heard it again. Not a falling object this time, footsteps. Slow, shuffling footsteps on concrete, moving parallel to me one aisle over. Hello, my voice sounded too loud in the silence. No response, but the footsteps stopped. I told myself it was another paralegal, someone else pulling files, but something about it felt wrong. The footsteps had been too slow, too irregular, and no one had answered me. I walked to the end of the aisle and looked down the next row. Empty. Just boxes and shelves and that dim overhead light swaying slightly, even though there was no breeze. I should have left, but the file was right there in my hands and I told myself I was being paranoid. I started walking back toward the elevator. That's when I heard it behind me, a voice. Low, barely audible, but definitely a voice. It sounded like someone whispering my name. I stopped, my whole body went cold. I turned around slowly. Nothing, just the archive room, silent and still. I walked faster. The lights ahead of me were flickering now, that slow, fluorescent strobe. Behind me, I heard the footsteps again, faster this time, keeping pace with me. I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe because running would have made it real, would have confirmed that something was chasing me. I just walked quickly, steadily, until I reached the elevator. I pulled the gate shut and hit the button for the 3rd floor. As the elevator started to rise, I looked back at the hallway. In the last second before the floor disappeared from view, I saw someone standing at the far end of the corridor. Just a silhouette backlit by the archive room lights, perfectly still, watching. The elevator lurched and the basement vanished. I stood there shaking, gripping the file box, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. When I got back to my desk, I checked the sign-in log for the basement. You were supposed to log your name and time when you went down, for security. I was the only name on the list that day. I asked around the office. No one else had been down there. One of the older secretaries, Linda, gave me this look when I described what happened. She told me that a partner at the firm had died down there in the 90s. Heart attack while pulling a file. They found him the next morning. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't ask. I never went back to that archive room alone. If I had to pull something, I'd wait until someone could go with me, or I'd make up an excuse and get someone else to do it. I left that firm a year later for unrelated reasons, but I still think about that silhouette sometimes. The way it stood there, motionless. The way it didn't follow me, just watched me leave. I wonder if it's still down there, waiting in the dark between those shelves. And I wonder how many people have seen it and never said anything, just like me.
Please subscribe to my channel and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue.
When I was in college, I rented a house with 3 other students. It was one of those old 2-story places just off campus, cheap rent, creaky floors. the landlord who never fixed anything unless you threatened to call the city. My room was on the second floor, but the washer and dryer were in the basement. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed joists overhead, stone foundation walls. There was a single bulb hanging in the laundry area and another one near the stairs. The rest was just darkness. The back of the basement extended under the whole house, but I never went back there. There was nothing back there except shadows and the smell of mildew. It was late October, a Sunday night. I had an exam Monday morning and I'd put off laundry all week. Around midnight, I grabbed my basket and headed down. Everyone else was either asleep or at the library. The house was quiet. I loaded the washer and started it, then sat on this old wooden stool we kept down there, scrolling through my phone while I waited. The washer was loud, that industrial rumbling that fills the whole space. But underneath it, I started to hear something else. A rhythmic sound like breathing, heavy breathing. I pulled out my earbuds. I'd been half listening to music, and the breathing got clearer. It was coming from the back of the basement, from the darkness past the laundry area. I stood up and looked into the shadows. Nothing. Just the washing machine chugging away, the overhead bulb swinging slightly on its cord. The breathing stopped. I sat back down, telling myself it was just the pipes or the furnace or the house settling. Old houses make all kinds of sounds, but my hands were shaking. The washer cycle ended. I moved the clothes to the dryer, started it, and sat back down. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to come back down later to get my clothes. I just waited out. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not regular footsteps, dragging, like someone pulling their feet across the concrete, coming from the back of the basement, moving toward me. I stood up fast, stools scraping against the floor. The footsteps stopped. The dryer kept tumbling. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Who's there?" my voice cracked. "Nothing." I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, pointed it toward the back of the basement. The beam didn't reach far, maybe 15, 20 feet before it dissolved into darkness. But I saw something. Movement. Something pale, low to the ground, pulling back into the shadows. I ran, left my laundry in the dryer and just bolted up the stairs. I locked my bedroom door and didn't come out until morning. When I told my roommates the next day, they laughed it off. One of them went down to get my clothes. He said there was nothing down there, no footprints in the dust, no sign of anyone or anything. But he also said something weird. He said the back of the basement was colder than it should have been, like noticeably colder. And when he shone his light back there, he saw something on the wall, scratches, fresh scratches in the stone like something had been clawing at it. The landlord came by later that week for something unrelated, and I mentioned it. He got quiet. Then he told me that the previous tenants had left in the middle of their lease. Wouldn't say why, just broke the lease and moved out. He acted like it was no big deal, but I could tell he was uncomfortable. I stopped doing laundry at night, started going to the laundromat down the street, even though it was more expensive. My roommates made fun of me, but I didn't care. We moved out at the end of the school year. On the last day, while we were packing up the truck, I went down to the basement one final time, just to see it in daylight, to prove to myself there was nothing to be afraid of. The scratches were still there on the wall, deeper than I remembered, and next to them something I hadn't noticed before, a child's handprint pressed into the stone, too small to be any of ours. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know if it was there when we moved in, but I left that basement and didn't look back. Sometimes I still wonder what I saw that night, what was moving in the darkness, and I wonder if the next tenants have heard the breathing too, or if whatever it was only comes out for certain people. I don't think I want to know the answer. I worked night security at a regional hospital for about 6 months while I was between jobs. It wasn't a bad gig, mostly just walking rounds, checking doors, making sure the parking lots were clear. The hospital was a sprawling complex, multiple buildings connected by skywalks and underground tunnels. The tunnels were for staff and maintenance, keeping the hospital running without cluttering up the main hallways. I didn't like the tunnels. They were narrow, lined with pipes and electrical conduits, lit by these yellow utility lights that made everything look sickly. But they were part of the route, so twice a night I'd have to walk through them. It was March, a Tuesday night around 2 a.m. I was doing my second round. The tunnel I had to walk connected the main hospital building to the outpatient clinic. Maybe a quarter mile, straight shot, no turns. Concrete walls, low ceiling, that hum of machinery that's always present in hospital basements. I was halfway through when I heard it, footsteps behind me. I stopped and turned around. The tunnel was empty. Just the yellow lights receding into the distance, the pipes along the walls, the faint smell of disinfectant. I kept walking. The footsteps started again, matching my pace. I stopped, they stopped. I started, they started. I turned around again, faster this time. Nothing. My radio crackled. It was Jim, the other guard on duty, checking in from the main building. I told him I was in the tunnel, everything was fine. He said he'd see me when I got back. I kept walking. The footsteps continued behind me, but I didn't turn around again. I just focused on the door at the end of the tunnel, the exit sign glowing red in the distance. Then I heard something else. A voice, faint but distinct, coming from one of the side passages. The tunnels had offshoots, smaller corridors leading to mechanical rooms and storage areas. This voice was coming from one of those. It sounded like someone crying. Soft, muffled crying like someone trying to stay quiet. I stopped. Every instinct told me to keep walking, to get out of that tunnel and never look back. But I was security. If someone was hurt, if someone needed help. I turned and shone my flashlight down the side passage. It was short, maybe 30 feet, ending in a heavy metal door marked boiler room, authorized personnel only. The crying was coming from behind that door. I approached slowly. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The boiler room was hot, oppressively hot. The air shimmered above the massive industrial boilers and the noise was deafening, clanging, hissing, the roar of fire. But underneath it all, I could still hear the crying. I moved between the boilers, following the sound. It led me to the back corner of the room, where the shadows were thick and my flashlight barely penetrated. And there in the corner I saw her. A woman in a hospital gown, sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, face buried in her hands. She was rocking back and forth, crying. "Ma'am," I called out over the noise. "Are you okay? Are you a patient?" She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge me, just kept rocking, kept crying. I got closer. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be down here. Let me help you back upstairs." I reached out to touch her shoulder. My hand went through her. Not like she wasn't there. I felt resistance, like pushing through cold water. But my hand passed through her shoulder and she didn't react. I jerked back. She kept crying, kept rocking, completely oblivious to me. I backed away slowly, out of the boiler room into the tunnel. I pulled the door shut and just stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what I'd just seen. My radio crackled again. Jim asking if I was okay, saying I'd been gone longer than usual. I told him I was fine, headed back to the main building, didn't mention the woman. When I got back, I asked Jim about the boiler room. He'd worked there for 5 years. He said maintenance guys hated going down there, said it always felt wrong, like someone was watching you. One guy refused to go down there alone after hours. I asked if anyone had ever died down there. Jim got quiet. Then he told me that about 10 years ago, a patient had wandered off from the psychiatric ward. They found her 3 days later in the maintenance tunnels. She'd gotten into the boiler room somehow and died from the heat. He didn't know her name, just that it had happened. I finished out my shift. But when I left that morning, I drove straight to the temp agency and told them I needed a different assignment. I didn't give a reason. I never went back to that hospital, but sometimes late at night I think about that woman, the way she sat there, crying, trapped in that moment. And I wonder if she's still there in the corner of that boiler room, waiting for someone to help her. I wonder if she even knows she's dead. Have you ever been in such situation? Share your experience with us in the comment section. Please don't forget to subscribe and like.